When Dave Brown right along ringside, by golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey, guys, and welcome back to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. I am Ray Russell, and this week, boy, I can't wait to get back in to the ICW, the Poffo family's International Championship Wrestling, based out of Lexington, Kentucky. We've seen some good years, some fun years thus far, and now we dive into the decline, I do believe is what the best way we can put it here. Going into 1983 in the ICW territory, the outlaw promotion that was the ICW. And in order to do that, we're going to continue on our journey with the one and only. He is Mr. On Assignment, returning from the great state of Hawaii, though he didn't bring me back my coconut bra, but that's okay. I forgive him. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back the one and only Mr. Steve Crawford.
Oh, I'm relaxed. I'm tanned. I'm ready to talk about the world's greatest outlaw promotion, ICW, and another fascinating year in the life of the Poffos and the promotion.
World's greatest and fascinating, both subjective, but I'm totally on board with those statements. So we are ready to roll. We've covered several years thus far. It's been a blast, and everybody's really enjoying going back and listening to the stories of the early Macho Man days and everything going on here at ICW. I mean, I think, as chaotic as it was backstage, I think that intro video that they have, it kind of explains what ICW was, not just in the ring, but behind the scenes as well. Just all the chaos going on.
This is the most, I think, chaotic year in the promotion. A lot of these stalwarts, leave as we'll talk about as we get through this. But then there's just some fascinating kind of sidebar things that happened as well. I don't know how they really even survived this year.
Yeah, it's a damn near miracle. Even by the time we get to the summer, I go, and they have 6 more months of this here. It's kind of crazy to think about. But this is 1983 in the ICW Poffo territory, the outlaw promotion that was ICW. Yes. And Steve, I'll let you take it away, man. We'll get rolling.
All right. So, we had some interesting characters that came through in 1982, as we talked about. Thunderbolt Patterson was in and out. Ox Baker was in and out. Then we had the big build-up for Radamias, and they did the thing where Radamias kind of worked his way from the bottom of the card to the main event. And the other thing that was interesting is that Randy Savage kind of became a default babyface.
Right.
And then when he became a default babyface, they had to turn Ronnie Garvin heel because they didn't have enough babyface heels.
It's one or the other. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1983, they do a show in Springfield, Illinois, which was about as far north as they ever went in Illinois. They never Springfield and Decatur. So it was kind of mid-state there for people who are familiar with that geography. So on this card, Angelo Poffo took on the Great Kabuki. Of course, not Gary Hart's Great Kabuki. We're talking about the aging Ray Urbano, who'd been on the shelf for about, I think, 7 years before he made it. It
was quite a while, yeah. Made his big epic return to the world of pro wrestling.
Yeah, we had Abdullah the Great, who was Buster Adams, who worked quite a bit in the Indianapolis territory, versus Gama Singh. I think I saw one note that called that Rama Singh, but as I looked into it, I'm pretty sure this was the guy that worked a lot in Canada, Gama Singh.
Wow, okay.
Terry Falk and Jerry Anderson. Jerry Anderson was African-American, did some jobs on television, never showed any offense or anything. So they're just really trying to fill the card here. Versus Rip Rogers and Pez Whatley. Leaping Lanny versus Ronnie Garvin in the semi, and then Randy Savage versus Radamias in the main event. And Lanny, quote, won the Southeastern belt on this night. So,
did he now? Okay.
Yeah, he won Ronnie Garvin's Southeastern belt. So, yeah, just a little trivia note.
Okay.
Danny Bentley, good friend of the show, he sent me noted that Bill Howard had also worked as Radamias in Amarillo, which I had not been aware of. I knew he'd done that in Memphis in like 77. Right. And then in late 78, early 79, he was in Amarillo working that gimmick. So he tried, man. He tried. He tried to get that over.
I got this great gimmick. I'm going to bring it down to you.
Yeah. All right. One of the big stories late 1982, they managed to get back into Rupp Arena, which was always their goal.
Right.
When they started the promotion, whenever they got any sort of publicity, they would say, we need to be in Rupp Arena. We could be this major league promotion. So January 20th, there's only 4 matches that were advertised. They would list other people on the card, but we don't know what those matches were. So the top 4 matches, we have Danny Fargo versus Mike Doggendorf, George Weingroff and Doug Vines versus Rip Rogers and Pez Whatley, Leap and Lanny versus Ronnie Garvin, Savage versus Radamias. So a lot of the same matches, that we'd seen earlier.
Sure.
I don't have any attendance figures for that show, which was their second to last show in Rupp Arena. The only reference I saw was, I think it was the late Eric Westlin, who we probably need to talk about a little bit. He had posted at one point that Angelo had, quote, lost his ass on these last 2 ICW shows.
Okay. Well, I could see that. Certainly I'm telling you, man, the drop-off just overnight, really, from 82 to 83, looking at the card from top to bottom is insane.
It is. Interestingly enough, on February 13th, they were back in Knoxville, Chilhowie Park, but they weren't promoting under the ICW banner. There was a local guy named George Cavaleras who was the promoter, and Savage versus Radamias was the main event there in Chilhowie Park. And they would go back a number of times to work for George Cavaleras that year. Just a little outlaw promoter trying to make some money in Knoxville again after everybody had left.
Right.
Our last show in Rupp Arena, February 17th. So I think that was a total of 4 shows that they ever ran in Rupp Arena. They ran one early in their existence, 80, 81-ish.
What is the irony that the only time they ran in Rupp Arena was when they didn't really have the roster to run in Rupp Arena?
Exactly.
At the very beginning and the very end. That's unfortunate.
Right.
Man.
The arc of the promotion was way too far done to be trying this.
Right.
So here's what we know on this card. We have Radamias against Rick McCord, so he's been pushed down the card. Yep. His run's pretty much over. Lanny versus Ronnie Garvin, can't get enough of that one. Mike Doggendorf versus Pez Whatley, and the Great Kabuki versus Randy Savage.
Oh, that had to be fun. I'm sure Kabuki was bumping like a champion for the Macho Man.
I'm sure Randy had to pull out every trick that he had to
the
try
promoter's
to get
son, and he can't even get a better match than that. I mean,
yeah,
that's where we're at right now. He's working the gimmicks basically. Radamias, now Kabuki,
and as I think I mentioned in the last, I don't think that this was running. I don't think ICW was running on Memphis television anymore at this point. I don't recall the Great Kabuki being in the promotion. I certainly don't recall Tojo and Gypsy Joe coming in later in the year, which we'll talk about, because that definitely would have raised my eyebrow at the time.
Sure.
Danny Fargo, who was in pretty briefly, he ended his short run. Yeah, I mean, the thing about going into Rupp Arena, it's like sometimes you get what you want, and it's the worst thing you can possibly have happen to you.
Right.
You think you won something, and it turns out to be kind of a curse. And Lanny Poffo later said, Rupp Arena has a lot of prestige. It also has a lot of expenses. It's a beautiful building, but I'm only interested in the bottom line. We did better when we wrestled at Henry Clay High School and let their booster club sell tickets. That may not seem quite as glamorous, but profits are better than losses when you're living in the real world. So he pretty much admits that they were losing money at this time frame trying to run Rupp Arena.
Well, it's a small fish in a big pond situation. It's almost like people referencing AEW. Now, that's a different world because of the money they have backing it, but at the same time, they were running buildings and they weren't drawing enough people to fill the building. I don't know that it really affects them like it would the Poffos here, but here they are. It's Lexington. The Rupp Arena is like 23,000 people in the building. I mean, that's how many it holds. That's not how many the ICW was. I think they were drawing about 10% of that, which is... That's not good business, right, baby. You know what I'm talking about.
We have a rare attendance figure. We have a couple of attendance figures during this year, which is very rare. That they drew a reported 250 people to Decatur, Illinois on February 19th. And that was a main event of the Great Kabuki and Radamias, both gimmicks, going against Angelo Poffo and George Weingroff. And Yeah. Babyface Randy Savage defeated Pez Whatley in the semi. Then we get to March 1st at Evansville.
Oh, my God. I can't believe I'm reading this.
We're really bringing the retirees out in this one. So the opener, Moose Cholak versus Paul Christie, and I showed them at that time having a combined age of 95 years old.
I mean, wow. Moose Cholak was like on the earliest Dumont network, man. He was coming out with that big moose head and shit, looking like a goof. I mean, he couldn't even move in the 50s. This had to be really, really sad. Go back to running the bar, Moose. My goodness, holy cow!
Yeah. Also on that card was Angelo versus Tony Fogg, George Weingroff versus Garvin. Garvin really getting pushed down the card here. Maybe he'd already put in his notice. Lanny Mike Goggendorf versus Pez Whatley and Rip Rogers, and the Great Kabuki versus Savage.
So this is where Paul Christie comes into the company. Now, Christie had known Angelo for decades by this point, and Paul Christie had been working for decades at this point. He must find some of the pharmaceuticals that Randy's on, though, because Paul gets well put together enough to actually get hired by Vince for at least a couple weeks there in the WWF. I don't know if you've ever seen the TNT episode.
Oh, yeah. Where
Paul Christie's apparently a fucking magician. He's like Harry Stone on Night Court or something. I don't know what's going on there.
Well, yeah, he has said that he was really nervous about that, and he drank all day. So when you view it under the eyes of a very drunk man trying to perform, it's a train wreck. At one point, he does this card trick with Lord Alfred Hayes, and the card that he draws at the end, the common thing was like a 6 of clubs or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
But he has the deck of cards upside down, and you see that every card is the 6 of clubs.
Oh my God. Tremendous. Paul Christie. Yeah, I mean, Miss Bunny Love, his longtime companion and manager, she's still out there. She's out there on Facebook. So if for some reason she stops by and listens to this, just hello. And I'm not making fun of your man. I'm simply enjoying, that's what he was out there. He was out there for our entertainment. But it's crazy to see some of these names popping up, but they're taking on anybody that had been a name at some point in pro wrestling. Yeah, and I had read Lanny at one point saying Paul Christie helped him a lot early in his career. Yeah,
I think back in like '73 when Phil Golden opened up that All Star Wrestling in Kentucky.
Yeah,
I think they were both there at the time, and Paul would give him instructions about his matches and what to do and what not to do and things of that nature. But also regarding Bunny Love, she actually wrote a book that's available. I bought the Kindle version.
Okay.
And an interesting read.
Okay. That sounds fun.
Yeah, we get into mid-March. There's a show in Prestonburg, Kentucky. We've got Babyface Savage versus Heel Garvin. So it's just interesting. These guys have basically been wrestling each other on the main event for
5 years.
4 years.
4 years, yeah.
It's just crazy. So here's one of our first little interesting sidebars. I don't know how I stumbled across this. I don't know if Danny Bentley told me about this but so in April of 1983, there's this promotion that opens up running Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Fort Smith, Arkansas. And it's called Central Championship Wrestling. Yeah, Danny Hodge is the top attraction.
I saw that in results. I hadn't realized Danny came out of retirement and worked here in the early 80s just until the last couple months.
Yeah, crazy. And from what I've read online, they had no television tapings, and they were actually using ICW tapes to promote their show.
Holy shit.
Which is amazing. But that's where Radamize and Ray Arbano spent April of 1983 after they left ICW. And some of the other guys, Doug Summers, Don Bass, Gama Singh, who we mentioned earlier, Ron McFarland, Jerry Brown. So a very interesting little outlaw promotion that lasted for a short. Can you imagine in April 1983, like, I'm going to run against Bill Watts in Tulsa in Oklahoma City.
That's some balls. I mean, Leroy McGurk couldn't even run up against Bill forever, right? So, I mean, my goodness.
I'm sure Danny Hodge called Bill and said, "Hey, I got this money, Mark."
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what's all over it. We're going to make a few bucks here until apparently his money lasts for about a month or two, from what I saw in the results I could find on this outlaw promotion, if you will. But yeah, no doubt about it. This is just a Danny Hodge gimmick of, "Hey, Bill, I just want you to know Sure, Danny, make a couple bucks. Cowboy don't care.
Exactly. Like, take the money and get this guy out of the business. So
Right.
just I would have loved to seen some tapes of that show. That had to be hysterical. All right, we're going to go to Beckley, West Virginia in April, one of the regular towns, one of their better towns. So here's what we've got for Beckley now that we no longer have our friends Ray Arbano or Radamias on the card.
Oh, boy.
Opening match, Lanny Poffo, the TV champ, defeats, quote, Mr. Wrestling, which is Johnny Wilhoit under a mask. Mm-hmm. Paul Christie, making the circuit, defeats Angelo Poffo. Little Coco defeats Billy the Kid, little person's match there.
Sure.
Moose Cholak, also him and Paul, I'm sure, shared a ride. He defeats Pez Whatley. And then Savage defeats Ronnie Garvin in a steel cage match, and Ronnie is out of there.
Well, you've heard of a one-match show before. That was a one-match show. No offense to some of these guys on the undercard, but I know Pez will soon evaporate from the territory as well, so good for him as he's working Moose Cholak here on April the 7th, 1983. But Savage and Garvin, what a way to go out for Ronnie Garvin. They do a steel cage match, and Garvin is no more. So two things here. I'll let you talk about Ronnie here in a moment, but also I can't wait to see who Randy works with now that Garvin's gone.
It gets real interesting, let me tell you. So your good friend Bob Roop talked about Ronnie leaving the promotion and the issue. Of course, all these people who, quote, owned stock in the promotion were owed a bunch of money when they left. Mm-hmm. So here's what Bob Roop said. Ronnie told me that he had about $30,000 coming when he left. He went to Angelo, and Angelo started giving him the poor mouthing. Angelo said, I can give you like $5,000 and pay you later when the money comes in. Ronnie didn't have any contract signed with the Poffos. Ronnie knew that Angelo wasn't going to pay him. We had a guy working for us, and this would be in Atlanta, named Gary Sabaw, who was known as the Italian Stallion. Of course, he's a long-time
world spaghetti eating champion.
Yes, you saw him forever doing jobs on TBS.
Yeah.
Gary went with Garvin the next time he saw Angelo. Gary and Angelo went off in private. When they came out after 15 minutes or so, Angelo wrote Garvin a check for $30,000. I don't know what he said to get Angelo to fork out that full amount, but it must have been something devastating. Angelo would rather cut off a toe than pay $30,000.
Isn't that interesting? Because the Poffo family from Italian descent themselves, but clearly they don't have the connections of one Gary Sabaw. You would have thought he would have been bigger in the business with connections like that, but wow.
And again, we're probably talking inflation calculator, today's money. That's probably like $120,000. I mean, that's a big sum of money.
Yeah, it's a good chunk of change, no doubt about it. And I'm sure Angelo saved every penny from the time he was selling papers on the corner or whatever the hell he started out doing there in the beginning of his life. But it's crazy to read stories like, and Bob obviously has told that story as well on the Stoop podcast. So I've heard this before, but man, it's crazy to hear a situation like, and Ronnie Garvin of all people, if he wanted his money, he could probably go get his money. But I would have loved to have been in that room during that conversation. That's for sure.
Yeah, there was certainly discussions about friends who could do favors and things of that nature, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Now that Ronnie's gone, we'll get some different perspectives from different people on Mr. Garvin. Here's Rip Rogers on Garvin's private plane. The big rib was he'd take you up on the plane and he'd act like he was running out of gas. You'd shit your pants. Then he would take, for example, leapy landing and say, okay, this time we do it, you're in on the rib. I'd start screaming, you'd start screaming. Then he'd say, this is a shoot. We really are running out of gas. Then he'd get me again. Wow. So he liked to terrorize people on his plane.
Clearly. I mean, it wasn't bad enough to fucking beat the shit out of him and tie him in pretzels in the ring. Let's give him a heart attack up in the fucking friendly skies. Okay.
George Gray or the one-man gang. Ronnie Garvin was the snuggest, stiffest, craziest person you'd ever want to work with. Ronnie just beat you up, basically. He'd light you up like a candle.
And this coming from a 6'10", 500-pound man, by the way.
Yeah. I used to love watching Garvin and the Job Guys on TBS.
Oh, man. I feel so bad for those guys. In 2026, I still watch that and feel bad for those guys.
Yeah. Tim Tyler, the former announcer on ICW, Garvin was like second in command of that group. A lot of the time we would have meetings before the show and he would make minor adjustments. Ronnie was a great guy. So here's Rip on actually wrestling Ronnie Garvin. I didn't have any say in our matches. Garvin would just beat the shit out of me, and you'd better fight back. He never said a word in the ring unless we were at a house show. We went 40 minutes. He'd say double knockout in that French-Canadian accent. He didn't take flatbacks. He bumped the way it would be in a real fight. He was solid. He was snug. The people believed in him because he treated everybody the same. We were total opposites. He was a hunter, a fisherman, lived on a boat, drove crazy, sort of a wild man, fly that airplane. He was a man's man. I was just busy trying to play being a wrestler because that's all I wanted to do. And here's a great quote from George Weingroff. I used to gas up Ronnie Garvin about Rip. Ronnie didn't like him. Ronnie would beat the shit out of Rip Rogers and pull his trunks up his ass.
Oh, man.
With friends like George, you know?
Yeah.
Here's another quote from Rip. We just worked and you simply wrestled. There were never any high spots. You'd telegraph moves and he would react accordingly. If you dropped down a little early, he could tell you were going to do a leapfrog or whatever it was. Ric Flair on Ronnie Garvin. He beat the skin off of me.
Literally.
And Jim Cornette. Ric Flair loved working with Ronnie Garvin because he was such a good worker and so believable. They beat the shit out of each other. Garvin had beaten the top layer of skin off of Flair's chest. Every night before he'd go to the ring, Flair had to put on antibiotic cream because the third layer of epidermis was exposed and prone to infection.
Oh, my God.
And I've heard Garvin say that, I mean, Flair never complained. And those, I mean, he took those chops night after night after night. Garvin would just lay them in there with everything he had.
Say what you will about Ric Flair. He still grew up originally, you know, the 1970s. He grew up in that old school world. So he took it like a man in that ring. They had some amazing matches, did those two. I don't think Garvin gets enough credit for his run there with Flair. Not necessarily the world title stuff, but just in general, his matches with Flair were tremendous.
Oh, absolutely. Those were fantastic matches. April and May, ICW is just kind of running their same towns. Like you have to really kind of work to find these cards and results. They're not in like wrestling.
They're scattered, man. It's like
scattered. You have
it's
to
like
just
it's
kind
like
of work.
A guy once told me in the wrestling business, it's like a rhino fucking a football. It's all over the place.
There you go. That's what this is like. So if you look online, you think, well, this promotion's just stopped running towns. They were running towns. There just weren't enough people that anybody decided to put them out anywhere.
I hadn't realized they ran Ashland. That's so close to the border of Southern Ohio. I never saw any Cincinnati results or anything like that. So it's kind of peculiar.
Yeah. So in May of 1983, we have two new young tigers coming into the promotion.
Yeah.
Tojo Yamamoto, age 56.
Holy cow.
Gypsy Joe, age 49.
Did you say Tojo was 56 and 83?
That's what I looked it up on. If Wikipedia is right, Wikipedia says he was born in 1927. So that's the math I was doing last night. But
holy cow, that means he's almost 60 in 1985 Memphis. Wow, unbelievable.
Yeah. That had to be rough. But I would love to see those tapes. All right, in May of '83, we've already lost Garvin. Rip Rogers, who does not leave on his own accord. He was told by Randy Savage, it's time for you to go.
Wow. There's something happened there, right? Because like they have nobody. So to tell one of your better workers, you got to go. I mean, there's some more shit to that story.
Yeah, we'll get to some of that. Yeah, there's some personal bad blood there.
Right.
I think Rip has said that he actually went to work for Robert Fuller for a week under a mask. But then Garvin booked him into Bill Watts territory. So then he's working underneath for Bill Watts for several months.
Right.
So here's Rip Rogers talking. For 4 years, Randy was my roommate, my best friend, my mentor, everything. The first 95% of what I learned in the business was staying with them, meaning the Poffos. Hell, Judy Poffo even did my hair. Randy was a competitor. I think his dad would dig at him when I beat him in bodybuilding contest. He would get on the gas. I wouldn't. I was married to Brenda Britton. He liked her. We lived together and he wanted her. She said, no, he's crazy. We moved in together and got married. Then there was tension. There had never been tension before. I was too naive to see it. So basically Randy's legendary jealousy kind of breaks the long-term relationship. And we know later there was a fight between the two in a locker room in Louisville.
Is this not similar to the Dusty story with Sam Houston and Baby Doll, though? Like, it's like, you made it to the wrong person, baby. You got to get right. The booth are made for walk-in, if you will.
Yeah, what are you doing with this undercard guy?
Right. How dare you? How dare you get with him?
How dare you fall in love with an undercard guy? What's wrong with you? All right, May 4th, interesting result. The Sheik from Detroit comes down to Frankfort, Kentucky. So once again, he'd been in for a few months previous to this.
Right.
So we do get a legitimate headliner, and then Abdullah the Great was on that card again. So he's kind of in and out. And then we have another reported attendance: 94 people in Prestonburg, Kentucky. I remember Rip saying, we would get like 500 to 700 in Prestonburg. So they're down to under 100 people.
Well, Rip wasn't here for to be fair, Rip wasn't here for this one. That's why he doesn't know that they only drew 94. Right.
And the main event is Savage versus Big Boy Williams.
Holy balls. Ralph Big Boy Williams here. Well, you can't say he never main evented ICW. Sorry.
He gets
promoted.
Savage.
It's a war of attrition, man. If you just hang around long enough.
All right. So here's a really fascinating appearance in May 12th in Beckley, West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna lead to one of our other really interesting sidebars. So here's the card in Beckley on May 12th, 1983. Johnny Wilhoit as Mr. Wrestling takes on Tony Falk. Angelo versus Big Boy Williams, who's just coming off that big main event. Doug Vines versus George Goulas, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. George Goulas. The man that Tojo had threatened to kill a few years earlier,
right?
When he left Nashville and when he started ICW. Tojo and Gypsy Joe taking on Leapin' Lanny and Mike Doggendorf in Pez Whatley versus Randy Savage. So Pez gets pushed up the card just in time for him to leave. Late May, we have Garvin's already in Atlanta. There's the famous Tony Atlas Paul Orndorff fight, right?
Yes.
And you've covered that, and you know more about that than I do. But I guess Atlas left the promotion right after the fight with Paul Orndorff. And of course, in the old days, as Rip said, you had to have one African-American baby face. So now they're down one African-American baby face. So Garvin calls and says, hey, I've got a spot for you, but you have to come down immediately. And so Pez leaves ICW after 4 years without even giving notice.
Wow.
And
can't say that I blame him, especially by this point.
No. And Rip said next time I saw Pez, he had 2 Lincolns. And Pez actually got a pretty good push at times, especially when he first came down to Georgia.
Yeah.
And here's some different people talking about Pez. Rip Rogers, Pez was phenomenal. If you saw him as a babyface, you couldn't imagine him being a heel. If you saw him as a heel, you couldn't imagine him being a babyface.
I think that's pretty accurate, honestly, when I think about it with Pez.
Yeah, that's really a great compliment.
He was tremendous in the ring. He doesn't get enough credit overall, Pez. He was. I don't know that he ever had a bad match. I mean, maybe in the Jive Tone era, but outside of that, I don't know that he really ever had a bad match. I enjoyed his early stuff here. What exists here out here in Georgia, except for when Greg Valentine was coming in and didn't bother to even learn his name, and he was sending in the VTRs. He's like, I'm coming for you, Pete Whatley. And then somebody must have finally they must have given the Iggy finally. And then, Greg, they finally send a VTR in and Greg's like, oh, I was told your name is Pez, not Pete. I'm like, wow, we got to reference this. I would have just ignored it and made it go away, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, Pez could go with anybody. He could. Rip went on to say Pez was my favorite tag team partner. He was a great talker. I would just let him talk and I'd stand in the background pretending to be over. And Pez was the best man at his first wedding, which is interesting. Bill Martin, Randy Savage was very powerful, but Pez Whatley was the most powerful guy at ICW. And then Rip kind of reinforces this by saying Pez could crank out sets on incline bench press at 405 pounds. Then Randy would get out there and put up 405 on the bench press a few times and dare anyone to beat him. Nobody would try. Then when Randy would leave, Pez would put it up 5 times like it was nothing. He wasn't stupid. Don't upstage the boss.
Well, that's the opposite of what Rip Rogers has been doing. This Pez is a wise man, right?
Right. Pez is valuing his paycheck a little more than Bob Root. Pez and I shared our misery together. We would commiserate with each other because nobody was making any money. There was no real accounting of how much we drew. Pez was a lot of fun, good talent, good guy. And then George Grindgroff, what a great guy Pez was. He was always smiling. So,
I wonder if Bob played a part in getting Pez over to Georgia. I mean, I don't know that's something I spoke with him about, but it's just, Bob was working in the office underneath Ole, and not that Pez wasn't talented enough to get the job on its own. And like you said, they were looking for that next African-American, to replace Tony Atlee. Got to have one of those, right, Ole?
Right.
But,
I'm sure he had to be on it. I'm sure that he had to tell Ole, this guy's dependable. He's a good worker. I'm sure he paid.
And he needs the money.
Yeah. And the boy, and he's hungry. He's hungry.
That's right.
All right. We're going to go to Bluford, Illinois on May 23rd because I just love this main event here.
Holy crap.
Tojo Yamamoto, Gypsy Joe, and Doug Vines versus Leapin' Lanny, Moose Cholak, and Angelo. That had to be a classic.
I hope that was like 80% Lanny versus Doug Vines. And that's the main event. I don't even know what Randy was doing that night. My goodness.
That is brutal. That is brutal. Going back to the Wrestling Classics message board from our old friend CBC SCPO, which stands for Senior Chief Petty Officer. I had to look that up because I was an Army guy and I'm a Navy guy. The last card I saw in ICW in Manchester at Eddie's Couches Entertainment Center had Tojo and Gypsy Joe plus the Battens. This was June of '83 in front of maybe 75 people.
Wow.
So again, Rip had talked about times they had to actually turn away people at Ernie Couch's Entertainment Center.
Right.
Now you're down to the absolute diehards who will show up for anything.
It just sounds to me like they were doing the peak of their success when Rip was there, apparently, because he remembers everything being sold out, and now we can't even crack 100 people at these buildings. Unfortunately, Ernie Couch's Entertainment Center has been one of my enjoyable things here in the ICW world. The guy built a barn or he slapped together an arena in his backyard.
Yeah.
And now he can't even draw. Poor Ernie.
Yeah. Not going to make much off those pinball machines and selling hot dogs with 75 people in the house. So as far as Tojo, he worked for ICW from May to October of '83. He and Gypsy Joe won the tag team belts from Lanny and Doggendorf, and then later lost to Bart Batten and Johnny Wilhoit. So that is some high level talent that you're talking about there.
Oof.
All right, another really interesting sidebar is what was happening in St. Louis. At this point, Larry, is it Matazik? Is that how you say it?
Madison.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so he had broken off from the St. Louis promotion and was running his own shows in the Checker Dome. And he wasn't agreeing with the way Harley Race and the Kansas City people were always pushing the Kansas City talent on the St. Louis shows.
Right.
So he thought he could do better. And one of the people he starts putting on his cards is Randy Savage. So June 18th, Savage debuts in the Checker Dome, which is a major arena in St. Louis.
That is a huge building. I didn't even realize Larry had ran that. I mean, we haven't got that far in the, obviously nowhere near that so far in the St. Louis history, but I haven't memorized a lot of what, Larry does after the retirement of Muchnick other than trying to run opposition or trying to do something here before he gets in with Vince. But
yes.
That's crazy to see him running the Checker Dome here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the arena you would hear like the major arena rock bands playing.
Yeah.
So I don't know the capacity, but huge venue.
Well, even Sam Muchnick wouldn't even run there very often. It had to be a really big time show to even run an event there. So yeah.
Yeah. So Savage debuts bringing his old friend Doug Vines and manages to go over Doug Vines in his debut in St. Louis. I thought these main events were interesting, just the people they were pulling in. This main event was Sweet Brown Sugar and Bob Sweetan versus Tully Blanchard and Bobby Jagger. So they were getting like some of the San Antonio guys up there at that point. Yeah. Now this one really has to hurt. Okay, we've lost Ronnie Garvin, we've lost Pez Whatley, we've lost Rip Rogers. July of 1983, you lose Leapin' Lanny Poffo.
Oh my God! Oh, that's hard times, baby. When the promoter's sons start leaving the territory, you're on fucking dying days.
Things are bad when the promoter's son goes, Dad, hey, we tried. And of course, we've told the story about, how Lanny was never really happy there, really didn't want to be a part of that promotion. But anyway, he goes to, he does the summer tour up in Grand Prix Wrestling, which the Poffos had done,
For years, right.
Yeah, several times. Bowling Green, Kentucky in July. Again, just interesting who they're getting to fill out these cards. The card says Great Bolo, but I think they're talking about the Great Wojciechowski,
right?
Who worked in Indianapolis throughout the 1980s, versus Gary Lawler, the guy who would do like a cheap imitation of Jerry Lawler in Indianapolis,
right?
And the announcers would always mention how out of shape Gary Lawler was, as a rib towards Jerry Lawler.
It didn't really help Gary very much, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had the tights. He had.
I know. I've seen. Yes.
It's funny. It's a funny gimmick.
It's like Randy Hogan almost.
Yeah, there you go. Tojo takes on Tony Falk. Big Boy Williams and Doug Vines versus the Batten Twins for your main event in Bowling Green.
Okay.
And then July 19th, they're in Livermore, Kentucky, and your main event is Savage versus Doug Vines. So yeah, here's who replaced.
That is
Ronnie Garvin.
That's a fucking checker dome match, man. I hope Livermore sold out.
Yeah, buddy, I bet. Then on July 20th, they go to Bowling Green, and the main event is Savage versus Tojo. I was recently reading Dave Meltzer's 1985 Wrestling Observer, and Savage has actually done a job, I think, in Louisville or Lexington,
right,
to Tojo on his way out of the territory.
Yeah, we covered that.
Yeah, and Meltzer said that they had to be absolutely hysterical to see that.
I would have loved to have seen the finish.
Yes, it had to be something. I don't know how in the world Savage lies down for 3 seconds to Tojo, and
I think he's just counting the 7 figures. Hopefully, he'll be making their up north or something on the way out. Because
all right, July 22nd, Savage goes back to St. Louis, beating Big Boy Williams. So again, he just brings his buddy in to work the mid card. The main event, interesting: Nikolai Volkov, Toru Tanaku versus King Kong Brody and Spike Huber, and we will certainly be talking about Brody more as we go along. It's like Spike Huber is a main event guy. I can't get there.
Toru Tanaka in 1983. I mean, he looks great on TV in 1980. He's always in the background of any of those wrestling episodes of the TV programs. It's kind of crazy to see the talent that they're trying to work with here in St. Louis to get something going. And Toru Tanaka on one end, who's at the end of his rope, and Spike Huber, yes, of course, yes.
A lot of charisma there with Spike Huber. Yeah.
Shout out to Harold Strassler also for when he was recording all the Georgia footage that exists. Anytime Spike Huber appeared, it was just magically deleted. Like he paused those matches to save tape. I thought that was hilarious.
That is funny. All right. This is something that I learned about that's just fascinating. We talked about George Gula showing up on the cards, and of course, Tojo and Gypsy Joe were guys that worked for the Gulas forever. So Tim Deals provided me this great information. So in the summer of 1983, the George Gulas group, they're going to get back into the world of promoting, and they're going to promote Chattanooga, Tennessee again. And so we have TV results. Here's a show that they ran on July 16th, 1983. They called it UCW Wrestling. I don't know what that stood for. But here's what was on this tape. Leaping Lanny over George Weingroff. I don't know if that was a baby face mask or not. They had a tape of the Sheik managed by the Bug, who was Royce Carney, who would later show up on Georgia TV when Ole was doing the early morning stuff, versus somebody named Chris Curtis. Angelo Poffo over Hoot Gibson.
Hoot.
Gypsy Joe and Tojo over Ron Sexton and Tony Falk. Also on the show, Macho Man Randy Savage, Bart Batten, Doug Vines, Big Boy Williams, and the announcer was Sam Miniker of all people.
When in doubt, just go grab Sam. He's always doing something somewhere.
There you go. And Tim added, this aired on WRCB TV in Chattanooga, the NBC affiliate. No idea where the show originally aired. Then we have the card on July 21st in Chattanooga. I'd love to see the attendance figure for this one. We'll start with the opener, Tony Falk versus our good friend Gary Lawler. Jim Powell and Angelo Poffo versus Doug Vines and Big Boy Williams. Big Red shows up. Our old friend Big Red versus the Assassin. I have no idea if that's Roger Howell or it could be anybody, of course. It could be Tony Falk. Who knows? Candy Devine versus Sherry Martel.
Okay.
Tojo versus Bart Batten. And then the Sheik versus Randy Savage. So that's that card. And then that wasn't enough. They went back a week later to Chattanooga. We have another TV to promote the next show. So on this TV in July 23rd, Steve Manson over Ron Tribeck, a profile of Randy Savage. Doug Vines and the Animal Big Boy Williams are now the Defiant Ones, and they beat Jack Slade and some unknown jobber. There's a tape of Doug Vines and Tojo attacking Randy Savage.
Wow, that's money.
There's a tape of the Golden Boy Paul Christie winning over Angelo Poffo. And TV time runs out in a match between Tojo Yamamoto and Pat Rose. So Pat can only thank his lucky stars there.
No kidding.
So also on this show, Steve Cooper, Angelo Poffo, Bart Batten, Brad Batten, Paul Christie, Bunny Love. The announcers were Sam Miniker and Sally, and Tim Dills had a question mark there. I'm thinking Sally was most likely Lanny Poffo's wife at the time. Her name was Sally, and I'm guessing these tapes were made right before Lanny goes up to Canada.
Gotcha.
Because Lanny is not on these actual cards.
Right.
So the July 26, 1983. Here's the card: Big Red again versus Rich Sanchez. Doug Vines and Big Boy Williams versus Angelo Poffo and Jimmy Powell. Thunderbolt Patterson returns.
There you go.
Taking on Steve Cooper and headlining Tojo versus Savage.
So we go from the Sheik and Savage to Tojo and Savage. But hey, man, Thunderbolt, it's been a while. I knew he had to pop up again at some point.
But it's the irony of the Savages being so desperate that they're working with the Goulasses again.
Yeah.
Is kind of wild. And then Tim Dills had also noted Randy the Puffos worked some shows in Knoxville in 1983, but those were promoted by George Cavaleras and not Nick, which we mentioned earlier. George Cavaleras had some really interesting cards. So here's July 30th. The main event is an 8-man tag. So
this is back at Chilhowie Park then?
Yes.
Okay.
It's Savage, Angelo, Doggendorf, and Dirty George, who is the promoter.
Wow.
Puts himself in the main event.
Dirty George.
Dirty George versus Doug Vines, Big Boy Williams, Tojo, and Speed Manson.
The son of Mr. Tom Renesto there.
That's son of Tom Renesto, yes.
Tim Renesto, Speedy Talltree.
Speedy Talltree. Yeah, he worked Tennessee Independence for a long time. There were 7 other matches on that card, 18 wrestlers with several working twice. Dirty George was 51 years old at the time this card was promoted.
And untrained.
At least
it's an 8-man. You can hide him, maybe, hopefully.
There you go. Steve Weber wrote, I drove down from Bristol for this card. Dirty George, who Doug Vines later referred to as a funny little man whose dream was to promote wrestling, had no business in the ring. It may have been the strangest wrestling show I'd ever seen. Dirty George Cavaleras looked to be in his 60s, and he had a typical physique of a man that age. He carried a whip to the ring, and his work was truly pathetic. Speed Manson was a hippie type who probably weighed 135 pounds soaking wet.
Well, at least he was going with his real-life gimmick, Speed Manson there, the hippie. But wow, so he needed a gimmick. He just brought out a whip. I got one of these. What you got in the trunk, George? Dirty George? Bar of soap?
I did. I looked the guy up and I found his obituary, and he died, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And it had in his obituary how he loved to promote wrestling. Like he had this tremendous success, I guess.
40 years ago, 40 plus years ago. And it's like referenced in his obituary. I love it.
We've mentioned the Batten twins now, both of them working for promotion as well as our good friend Speed we just mentioned. Mm-hmm. August 19th, we're back in St. Louis. Savage teams with Tiger Conway Jr. to lose to Bob Sweetan and Dick Murdoch. What a tag team, Bob Sweetan and Dick Murdoch. The main event, King Kong Brody over Tora Tanaka. All right, so here's where we are on the cards on August 14th. Here's a show in Paducah. Angelo Poffo versus Steve Cooper. The challenger, versus Johnny Wilhoit, Big Boy Williams versus Randy Savage, and the main event, Bart Batten versus Speed Manson. So it's just, and things fall apart. They come back in 2 weeks later to Paducah, and of course, Savage takes on Steve Cooper, and 2 out of 3 falls. So we have to assume that Steve Cooper gets at least 1 fall over Randy Savage that night.
Well, you can assume that all night long. I have to wonder, do they go 2 out of 3 falls simply because there's like no talent? It's like, well, we only got 1 match tonight. We better go long.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like, okay, how can we drag 40 minutes out of this thing? Oh, we'll make it a 2 out of 3 falls, man.
I know how to stall,
It was, and then shortly after that, Steve Cooper suffered a major heart injury in a match with Mike Doggendorf. They say Angelo kept him around and used him to edit tapes. And Cooper had a heart transplant in the late 1980s. And Steve used to post on the message boards quite a bit in the early 2000s. He passed away quite a while ago. But he had such a long relationship with ICW, working as a manager, working as a wrestler, working behind the scenes. So I guess he was very loyal to the Poffo family.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell back to talk to you about all the new and exciting audio and video podcasts we've been putting together over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. As a self-funded brand, this entire ship is powered by our patrons. It's your support that keeps all of these wonderful shows going here at WrestleCopia. And with that said, I wanted to mention that we now have 3 major tiers with tons of Patreon-exclusive next-level content for our Patreon supporters. And it all starts with the $5 all-access tier, which gets you early access to many of the weekly podcasts, at least a dozen monthly digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure, the insanely detailed show notes for the Wrestling Memory Grenade Regional Wrestling, and the OG Monday Warfare podcast, plus random bonus video drops, archived old-school audio watch-alongs from the early years of the brand. It is a whole lot of fun wrapped under the all-access tier for only $5, but things get even hotter with the VIP Superfan tier. For just a few dollars more, you get everything already mentioned in the all-access tier, plus as part of the VIP tier, a whole new slew of videocast series where it's not just your typical watch-alongs. Sure, we laugh, we have fun, but we're also breaking down the history, the context, and the why behind what you're seeing. And as part of the VIP tier, you have access to Dan Gennety's Puro Resu Academy videocast, the Coliseum videocast, and the Monday Warfare videocast, Raw vs. Nitro, breaking down the history of the Monday Night War. Plus, you also get the Memphis 1985 folder of goodies and all show notes for the Puro Academy podcast and Gene's Retro Review Show. Lots to be had there at the VIP tier. But wait! There's more. For those WrestleCopia backers who crave even more from the brand, we bring you yet another level of content fit for a warrior, because it is indeed the ultimate tier, which gives you everything from the all-access pass, everything from the VIP tier, plus you will receive access to the big ones video series featuring a lengthy look and discussion into some of the biggest pay-per-views, super shows, and other events from throughout wrestling history. It's also a great place to keep up with the big events that coincide with the Monday Warfare videocast and so many other big events from years gone by. You'll also have access to the newest big hit to the Copia brand. I'm talking about Regional Wrestling Unreal, the video series. Get ready for the next level in Regional Wrestling as we dissect territory history in video form. Watch along with us. But still, even more for your money, guys. You'll also receive access to the Treasure Chest, which offers patrons the unique opportunity to download and watch select rarities from wrestling history. And for those of you who are wondering what we offer, are contemplating joining a paid Patreon membership, or simply a curious lurker, a reminder there's a free tier at our Patreon that you can join as well. Remember, guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, or look for the QR code where available. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all the quality programming that we offer.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
All right. Here's our monthly return to St. Louis. Savage this time goes to a time limit draw versus Tiger Conway Jr. Brody beats Nikolai Volkov via DQ in the main event. We go back to Paducah, September 11th, and I won't go through the whole card, but the main event is Bart Batten versus Randy Savage. Yikes. And
those Battens, they get the shit beat out of them in 1985 Memphis. I feel like it was because they had worked for the ICW at one point.
There you go. We're going to run through some of this quickly. October 7th, Randy's back in St. Louis again. This is a really interesting six-man tag. Scott Casey, Tiger Conway Jr., and Tom Pritchard go over Eddie Mansfield, Randy Savage, and Buddy Landell.
Wow.
What a group of personalities.
That is a lethal lottery all day.
Eddie Mansfield and Buddy Landell teaming together with Savage.
Randy in the middle there, yeah.
And of course, in the main event, Spike Huber goes over Tully Blanchard.
Keep pushing him, Larry.
Wow. We get to October. By this time, Lanny had done his Grand Prix tour. He had debuted on Mid-South TV, and he was looking like he was going to get a significant push until one day a booker named Bill Dundee was hired. But on the weekend of October 14th and 15th, they had like Leaping Lanny Appreciation Days in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and in Springfield, Illinois. So maybe he'd been missed during that 4 or 5 month period he was gone. We'll do the Cape Girardeau card. The main event was Savage versus Ron Sexton in a steel cage.
I saw Sexton had like a shirt. What was his nickname? The Ultimate Male or something? I don't even remember what it was, but I saw he was rocking a T-shirt. I guess it was his actual gimmick at some point right around this period, and I just I don't get it, man. I told Gene on the Memphis '85 show. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Ron. He's perfectly okay in the ring, but he just looks like if you went to the dollar store and bought a generic knockoff pro wrestler toy, like that's what Ron Sexton looks like. Just the generic black hair, the generic black mustache, and a pretty solid body. I mean, that's Ron Sexton in a nutshell. I don't see it. There's no personality behind this Ron Sexton character.
No, and to be in a main event steel cage match,
yeah. Let's just put a cage around it for the fuck of it.
There you go. And Lanny's big return to Cape Girardeau, he is teaming with Johnny Wilhoit against Paul Christie and a, quote, mystery partner. So I don't know who his mystery partner was. But,
whoever they plucked out of the crowd, Steve, that would be my guess.
That's right. And the next day in Springfield, Lanny defeats Big Boy Williams in his big return there. Mm-hmm. And the main event was Johnny Wilhoit and Bart Batten over Randy Savage and Speed Manson. And God let us hope that Speed Manson did the job in that one.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, we'll go back to St. Louis, October 29th, which would have been my 14th birthday. My 14th birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, Tora Tanaka and Savage versus Tiger Conway and Tom Pritchard in the Checker Dome. Main event, Brody over Volkov. And Savage was also booked for a card that night in St. Elmo, Illinois that started at 8:30. And you know, I first saw that card, I thought, man, 8:30 is a late time to start a wrestling card. And I looked, and it was about an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes from St. Louis to St. Elmo, Illinois. So I guess Savage worked a mid-card match, hopped in his car, drove over, and then headlined the event for ICW in some small town there.
In front of 94 people, right. Yeah, that's coming from St. Louis to help out old Papa Angelo.
All right. So we know that Savage and Brody have been working on these cards in the Checker Dome for several months now. And I guess as some sort of Hail Mary, the idea was, let's bring Bruiser Brody in and make him the ICW World Champion. Brody, of course, was, one of the biggest independent stars of the decade, made so much money in Japan, he could just kind of work wherever he wanted and do what he wanted in the United States. And I thought this was really interesting as it relates to what happens with Bruiser Brody. So Brody had been booked on a card in Cape Girardeau for October 30th. And the poster says it's a tag match, but everybody says the idea was they were going to put the ICW title on Brody. But the night before in St. Louis, Debbie Combs was on that card, the longtime kind of girlfriend of Randy. Mm-hmm. And this was a podcast she did with Wolfie D a few years ago. I told Randy, never ever bring a girl to a show that all the other boys would see. Randy brought the woman who sold tickets in Cape Girardeau to a St. Louis show. Debbie said, I told Randy we are finished, and Randy blew his top. King Kong Brody told Debbie, get your shit and come into my dressing room. So there's this huge explosion the night before Brody is supposed to show up in ICW, and Brody does not show up in ICW.
Oh, I guess not.
And the story is that they knew what hotel Brody was staying at. They knew the room, and they're knocking on his door, and either Randy or Angelo are yelling, where money lies, honor dies. It's just such a Poffo thing to say. It's so ridiculous. Brody's got to be thinking, no way in the world am I going to deal with these goofs.
So he takes a $200 draw from them and just no-shows the event? Okay.
Yeah, Rib said he took the money and just laughed about it, like, I'm going to take money from these marks.
Wow, that's...
So, shockingly enough, Bruiser Brody decided not to become the ICW World Heavyweight Champion.
Well, we're going to see how far that gets Bruiser in life here.
That's right. He's going to regret that one. November, they're running towns in Kentucky and Illinois again. The big thing is, since Bruiser Brody won't take the title, we find someone who will. Paul Christie wins the ICW title in Springfield, Illinois, November 13th.
Well.
So Mr. Magic, he would come into the ring with like a magician's top hat, and his gimmick would be that he would beat people with like this retractable cane.
Putting on the Ritz.
Yeah, you can see him smiling and doing a dance routine with that one.
Super duper.
Yeah. Let's look at the whole card. November 19th, Augusta, Kentucky. What this promotion has after almost 5 years of being in business here. Tony Falk, who just will not quit on this company, versus Ken Hall. But the Miser's back, so Angelo's got his mask back on versus Ron Strunk. Big Boy Williams versus Ron Sexton in a, quote, Texas death match, a mid-card Texas death match.
They're just slapping gimmick names on these matches to draw on the ads. If they can afford the ads, I don't know.
The Streetwalkers, Kenny Shane, our old friend J.R. Hart from Memphis, and Tim Long, take on the Mod Squad, which is not the Mod Squad that we think of out of the Carolinas.
Right.
It is Bart Batten and Johnny Wilhoit.
Okay.
So on Thanksgiving night, there's a big tag team tournament in Atlanta. And who shows up but Randy Savage, and he's tag teaming with Magnum TA.
Wow.
And I remember seeing the interviews that Savage sent in prior to this, and they were very kind of low-key, and, I guess he was trying to be a babyface, and it just wasn't natural for him at the time. Mm-hmm. It was not your typical over-the-top Randy Savage interviews. But, this is when Georgia is not – this is not the glory days of Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Right.
So in the tournament, he and a young Magnum TA defeat Guido Mongol and the Mongol. It's a new Mongol tag team. One of them I have as being the future cousin Luke. The other I have no idea. They win that match. They go on to defeat the Bruise Brothers, Pork Chop Cash and Troy Graham, coming down from Memphis. And they lose in the finals to Butch Reed and Pez Whatley. So the night that Randy Savage and Magnum TA were a tag team.
And Randy doing the job to old Pez.
Randy doing the job.
Everything comes full circle here.
That's it.
Little revenge for the pistol.
All right. And by this time, I'm sure Randy has made the deal to come into Memphis. I thought this was interesting just in terms of the timing of these things. So on December 2nd, Savage worked in a town, Cynthiana, Kentucky, which is 450 miles from Memphis. So figure he, is probably in a main event or whatever, probably gets out of there at 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
Then he debuts on Memphis Wrestling the next morning at 11 in the morning. And that's when him and Angelo come in, and it's like they're unannounced and, they're not supposed to be here, that sort of angle. And Lawler, your dad's dead, and the typical weirdness. And then that same night, he's in Bettyville, Kentucky, which is 455 miles from Memphis. He's driven 900 miles on Friday and Saturday to make that television debut for Jarrett.
My God, that's like a 7.5 hour drive on a highway, and there weren't a lot of highways in Kentucky back in those days either.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably had some medication to help him through the days. But all right, let's talk about Randy coming to Memphis. Jarrett said, after their organization folded, I called Randy Savage and said, you've plugged a match against Lawler for years. I don't know if you were really angry or what it was, but why don't we make some money off of it? And Randy was sort of emotional, saying, after all I've done to try to put you out of business, you're calling to give me a job? I said, yes, and I'll take your whole family. We'll do a deal where you show up on Memphis TV and carry right on with your challenge to Lawler, and we can pretend it's a shoot until we have the match. Lawler said, it got so personal between us that we knew it would draw. That was always our philosophy. Personal issues draw money. There was still plenty of bad feelings as they felt they were running opposition and trying to cut into our business, while the ICW guys were just trying to survive and eat. The hatred between two of us had so much credibility in the fans' eyes that we didn't even really advertise the first match all that much. Randy and I went to Lexington and nearly sold out the building, which was unheard of in Rupp Arena. We did it like a shoot where we had an ICW referee and one of our own referees, I think Paul Morton, to keep it fair. After everything had gone down, I guess you could say I was a little concerned if we could work together, but we never had any problems. I heard from so many guys later who worked with him that he was also paranoid about his matches and wanted to work out everything in advance. Randy was never that way with me. He was intense, yet laid back, very easy to work with. I think we had some good matches. And I've heard another story where Randy or Lawler is talking to Jimmy Hart about Savage coming in. Mm-hmm. And Lawler says to Jimmy, what happens if it turns into a real fight? And Jimmy Hart says, I'll jump in and help you.
Oh, man, that's what's the irony in all of this is for years, all Randy, Angelo, all they ever wanted to do was succeed in Rupp Arena. And yes. It's after Randy leaves, say, the ICW and goes over to the Memphis territory that they succeed in Rupp Arena, only now he's doing it for Jerry Jarrett. But Jerry, they talk about that sign in his office, personal issues draw money. I don't know that it ever got more personal than what they were doing on TV, the challenges and everything and whatnot. So I'm sure to anybody who was able to watch both television programs at any given time, I'm sure this was a huge deal. Yeah, and they, really built it up in Lexington on what the still, ICW program they had on there. And they were, ask fans, who do you think's going to win this match, blah, blah, blah. It drew about 9,000 people there, which was a record at that time for the largest crowd that they'd had. Jarrett said, I think we had a $65,000 to $70,000 house in Rupp Arena in Lexington. Lawler, Randy was sort of like Handsome Jimmy in that sense. He was so off the wall and entertaining, even as a heel, that gradually the people started to like them. In those days, you listened to what the fans wanted and gave it to them. And just like that, Randy was hot again, teaming with me. So he's talking about turning babyface. Right.
Jarrett said, I told him to take the WWF offer when it came. WWF was the big time. Vince later told me that Randy told him, I'd like to have a chance to make big money, but my honor is more important. I'd have to give Jerry at least a 2 to 3 week notice. And he did, which gave us enough time to promote a loser league town match with Lawler on the way out. Randy is a quality class human being. Lawler said, "I'll say this for Randy. He did the traditional thing. He did jobs around the horn on the way out and dropped the belt back to me. When we started working with WW in the early 90s, he was happy to come back and we started all over again. I always enjoyed working with him. Intensity-wise, he was one of the best and the people believed in him." So, promoting another promotion for 5 years on your show will eventually pay off. Is the
I guess also talent pays off in regards to Randy Savage. He's bigger than the ICW, right? Like he's working St. Louis. He got a gig in goes not just into a tournament on Thanksgiving night, which is essentially like the biggest drawing night for the Southern territories anyway, but he's going into the finals, right? With Magnum and things. And people don't even know necessarily who Randy Savage is there in the Georgia territory. So that says a lot of faith that they had in Randy to do these things in these bigger territories. And, but he's still working with Dad. And unfortunately, now the writing's on the wall. Lanny's already split from the company. Randy's still trying to work both companies, whatever's left of ICW moving into 1984, because, well, he loves his father, but also the Memphis territory is very close in hand with the ICW area. So Randy's trying to make that work still. And we know, as you're going to continue to go on and talk, but Angelo had some deals with certain TV stations, so ICW would live on for at least a while still.
Yeah, it really lived on till the time that Randy left to the WWF. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to go through like all the cards and all the results that I have. But, they were they're in Springfield, Illinois, Manchester, Kentucky. January, they ran their last show in Beckley, West Virginia, January of 1984. And let's see what we have on top of that one. The Mod Squad defeated Big Boy Williams and Ron Sexton. That's a way to wrap up a 4-year run in a city, isn't it? A lot of the Memphis guys would come into Cape Girardeau, Missouri, or at least they were booked there. Steve Kern tells a story that when he came in, Savage was like, "Oh, I thought you guys would no-show like all the other Memphis guys." And he said after that, he always had a very close relationship with Savage. And there's a picture of Steve Kern in his Skinner gimmick and Randy Savage. And it's like, take your dad to school day. And they're talking in front of a classroom all dressed up in their gimmicks.
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that. It's so peculiar.
But yeah, I mean, they're still running cards. And it's a lot of the same people that we mentioned all through like late 83. So here's an example. Paducah, Kentucky in April of 84. Speedy Talltree, Speed Manson, Ron Sexton, Angelo, the Streetwalkers, Bart Batten, Johnny Wilhoit. It's pretty much the same crew. It's amazing they still could put all those guys together. Lanny showed up in April of 84 in Cape Girardeau, even though he was still working in Mid-South. And we should talk more about the Mid-South. Lanny went in. And he was put in a team with Magnum TA, and the storyline is Wrestling 2 saying, "You can't trust this guy. Right. He's a Poffo. These are terrible people." and Randy was teased about coming in. And then
they play a music video, a Randy Savage music video on Mid-South TV.
Yeah. And then, as I mentioned, Bill Watts hires Bill Dundee, who had been punched in the face by Randy.
And the whole gun incident, yeah.
Yes, the whole gun incident, and missed about 6 or 7 weeks of work. And he was not willing to have Randy come into his territory as the booker,
as they say, yeah.
And Lanny immediately becomes the guy doing jobs on TV for the Midnight Express. So things change very quickly there.
That they do, absolutely.
There's still matches like in June of Paul Christie taking on Savage. So Paul Christie still defending this belt. Here's a really interesting card that in Jackson, Kentucky, in July, they're advertising Rip Rogers and Ted Oates against Ron Sexton and Speedy Talltree. So whatever bad blood there had been between Rip and Randy must have thawed somewhat at that time, if that actually occurred. That's the only time I've ever seen Rip advertise for ICW after he left.
Maybe it was because Randy wasn't on the card and Angelo just wanted to make a couple bucks. It's like we're bringing in Hollywood Blondes. I guess by that point they'd already been on Ole's morning TV, had they not?
Yeah.
By July?
Yeah, I would say so. So yeah, they probably thought we can get something out of this with these guys coming off the
TBS.
And
right?
again, I mean, 1984, I mean, they're running Savage is full time in Memphis.
Yeah.
But he's still, whenever he's not in Memphis, he's making these ICW cards like June 18th, Maysville, Kentucky. September, he's in Paducah, Kentucky. He shows up in Puerto Rico in September and beats Pedro Morales for the North American title. So he's working Memphis full time. He's working ICW. He's making shots in Puerto Rico. He made a shot in the Omni again in November. He teamed up with Tommy Rich, Tommy Rich and Randy Savage. Two guys whose careers would go in distinctly different directions in the rest of the 1980s.
that they would.
Lose to Scott and Bill Irwin. Several cards in Cape Girardeau in 85 with guys like Adrian Street, Lawler, the Fabulous Ones. June 6th, Savage debuts in WWF. The last card that I have is June 9th, Shelbyville, Kentucky, Paul Christie versus Bill Martin, and Savage versus Ricky Cook. So even, a month before his WWF debut, he's still running ICW.
Yeah, Randy's going to work well, and of course he gets Lanny the job with him when he comes to Vince. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement or bold move. This is your probably one and only opportunity, and you're telling the big shot, I'll come and work for you, but only if you bring my brother with me.
Yeah. So that's kind of the end of the road for the promotion, but I think we should talk about the legacy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Cornette, even though the talent was great, the fans' assumption was that all of these people who were in this obviously second-rate promotion were crazy or on drugs, because that's what they looked like and talked like, and sometimes that's what the angles looked like. It wasn't going to beat the established promotion with the names that the audience knew. And Cornette said it was a one-sided promotional war, but it was still bitter. In terms of legacy, Rip Rogers, who's trained so many people who've gone on to work for WWF and AEW and in different places. As a trainer, every principle I used came from the Poffo family. Mark Henry, Rip Rogers was the best wrestling coach I ever saw. Rip taught you what it takes to succeed in the moment. George Weingroff talking about ICW, it should have been a gold mine. We could have owned Lexington and Louisville and Cincinnati and a few others. Instead, we pissed everybody off and nobody wanted to work with us. So.
Well, that's a good point, too. We kind of just, went right through it. But there were periods there where you had even mentioned, too, and I had that in my notes as well, in regards to they would trash local venues, the owners of these buildings that they were wanting to run. And instead of playing ball with them, they're trashing them on TV to the point where they have to come back out and even apologize, retract statements that they're making. They would do that many times with different people and not in the wrestling business, but beyond the wrestling business. And that was just, it's one thing to go on TV and challenge Jerry Lawler and call him names and et cetera. It's a professional wrestler. Right. But it's another thing when you start bad mouthing and making accusations about legitimate businesses and things.
Yeah. I was, relationships matter, right? Relationships matter. And
sure.
That's Angelo never really, to him, the money was more important than the relationship. And, the two actually work hand in hand.
Correct.
Lanny, we didn't just have our TV in Lexington. It was also in so many places that it seemed like we were spending our life in a car, just driving from town to town, place to place. Izzy Slapowitz, for many of us who worked for ICW at the time, we couldn't wait to get out. We loved the boys. We loved each other, but the trips were very, very long. It was a tough territory to work. When you're traveling 8-10 hours a day, 7 days a week, it wears you down. That's very similar to what Bob Roop has said. It was Angelo that forced the boys to that camaraderie between the boys because all they had was each other. Right. They had a common enemy. Yeah. It was like being locked in a cage, and we are in this together, guys. Until we get out, right? Until we get out, one at a time. Our CBCSPO, going back to him. What the Poffos did was give people whose only source of entertainment was cable basketball and maybe a Moose Lodge or Drive, and give them a chance for $5 to see some of the best live wrestling anywhere. And after seeing Savage and Ronnie Garvin tear down Henry Couch's center, I believe it. So, yeah, entertainment options were much different in the early 80s than they are today. Most certainly. Tim Tyler loved Randy's booking. He's the one. He's the guy. almost before its time. It was very innovative, very entertaining. If they would have had the financial backing, they could have been forerunners in the wrestling game. Randy had such great ideas. The way he executed storylines months and months in advance, to me, was pure genius. All right, here's an interesting post that Crybaby Edwards put on a message board, kind of summing up what ICW did. I'm not sure about all of the numbers and things he mentions
Sure,
here.
right, yeah. I can see some of the numbers. I'm not so sure either.
He's typing off the top of his head, but at one time they had quite an impressive roster and 5 or 6 good TV markets reaching 10 states. They had a few syndicated stations also through the William Tanner Agency in Memphis, I believe. The tape was seen on 2 stations in Montana. I'm not sure about that, but they were seen in different places. They, like many others, were caught in a squeeze in national expansion of the WWF. It was a small operation that ran 30 to 40 months a show. Total regular employees was around 16. In 1981, they grossed approximately $660,000 plus merchandise, which mainly consisted of pictures and Wrestling News magazine. We sold 8,500 pictures in 1 year, along with 2,000 calendars and roughly 500 T-shirts. Everyone stayed busy. Many times talent made more money than those working for Jarrett or Goulas. I can see Goulas. I don't know about Jarrett, but yes, booking wasn't good as I look back. Randy Savage was a hardworking talent who became a great star, but he was no booker. And Jim Cornette would just die at this comparison towards the end. As for paying the bills, you can say what you want about the Poffo, but they paid their bills and raised a lot of money for nonprofit groups. The territory was basically the same territory as Jim Cornette had for Smoky Mountain. And I'm sure the last thing Jim Cornette would ever want is ICW compared to Smoky
The comparison,
Mountain.
correct, yeah.
All right. Couple more summaries. Wrap this up. Jerry Jarrett, Randy to this day is the most honorable wrestler I ever knew. His word, he would rather die than break it. He's the only wrestler that Vince Jr. called and went from Tennessee to the WWE. He's the only one that told Vince, only after I give Jerry whatever notice he asked for. And Vince McMahon is the one who told me that. And I think we'll end with Izzy Slapowitz. It's always a good way to end something with Izzy. And this was when he was talking to Scott Bowden on his podcast many years ago. It may be more popular now than it was then. It's taken on a life of its own so many years later. It blows me away. So that kind of wraps up the long and bizarre story of ICW wrestling, which managed to survive from 1979 through 1983 as kind of a full-time entity, and then was a part-time entity for a year and a half after that.
Where there's a will, there's a way, at least for a while, it would appear here, because Angelo Poffo willed this thing into existence, and somehow they brought in the all-star guys from Knoxville, and they made it work for a while. And I mean, they were running the small towns, but they felt like they had something. And really, when we were looking at the cards, and then they just luck into George Gray with this future one-man gang. I mean, they had a lot of great things going for them, but they couldn't sustain it, is really the story at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the fact that the booking wasn't good, TV production wasn't good, it was almost like Vince Russo crashed TV at points, though, where there was just shock value. Let's elbow drop a midget kind of deal, yeah, right,
things like that. Right. So anything that just made people tune in. It was almost like the Jerry Springer show in many ways, long before Morton Downey Jr. or Jerry Springer, in regards to just, let's see what will shock the people. Maybe they'll tell their friends and they'll tune in next week to see what we do next.
Right. Yeah, it was just very much, as Rip talked about, just kind of hand-to-mouth survival, cutting corners in every way that you could in your personal life to survive. But, many of those guys went on and did great things in the world of professional wrestling. And
I'd have to imagine that if Angelo actually paid the guys what they were worth at the time, that ICW wouldn't have lasted nearly as long as it did. I think he was working off the money that he was saving by not spending any of it or paying anyone, at least probably what they were worth at the time anyway. So
I think that's called the Paul Heyman model.
Very good, sir. It worked. I think Paul learned. I think ICW in some ways, not on the ECW scale, but was a lot like ECW. Too small to be big, too big to be small. You have talent like Randy Savage, and even he, who's kind of co-promoting this whole thing with his dad in many ways. He's going to have to be more successful in life than just running this. It's just not working after this many years, of trying. the last couple of years here, it's just been a decline, as you covered extensively with the results and the guys leaving. And the last holdouts like Pez and Rip Rogers, and once those guys were gone, there was really no point to even Lanny realized I must go. I'm gonna go write some poetry and do some things and wait for Randy to hit the big time, and I'll ride along with him.
That's got to be a brutal blow when the brother / son says, "Hey guys, we gave it a shot.
It's been real, guys."
I'd like to actually make some money at this point. I got a wife.
In regards to yes, exactly. In regards to the booking, though, I think the difference between ICW's booking and other territories were that in other territories, they pitch ideas and we can't do that. And in the ICW world, they pitch ideas and they go, we can't do that. And Randy goes, why not? Let's do it.
There was not a strong editor on the booking committee, that's for sure.
Without ICW, though, we wouldn't have so many great little clips and memories. The Canadian Bumblebee rehash with the gang or Broomfield, Crusher Broomfield in the box. And again, I hate to say it, but, midgets getting elbow dropped and all the other crazy nonsense that went on in that studio. Of course, the last little bit of footage of Radomias, I would love to see some of his stuff, like you said, in Amarillo in 79 or in Puerto Rico prior to that. Would love to see Radomias in Puerto Rico. I can't imagine what he did down there. But it was a hell of a run, I think, at the end of the day.
And there's a lot of people who look upon it very fondly. And if we didn't find some real entertainment value, we wouldn't have spent all this time and energy going through this. It was just, to me, like I say, the ultimate outlaw promotion. Guys almost literally living outside the laws of society, just trying to make something work.
The first ICW I was ever turned on to, there was a tape that was released. It was like half Memphis, half ICW footage. And I'm sure I can't think of the name of it, not just a commercial release tape, but I don't remember if I got it at a flea market or whatever the deal was, but somehow I got it for I think it was an indie show back in the early 90s. But it paid like $5 for it or something. And I was just the intro video was on that tape. I go, what the hell is this? And of course I knew Randy Savage and Ronnie Garvin. So I'm like, this is, awesome. And so that's when I fell in love with ICW. Easily the greatest outlaw promotion of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wrap this up. We did mention Eric Westlin, who did a lot of ICW history. He just passed away recently. Mm-hmm. He was not a fan of our podcast, and I didn't appreciate some of his criticism and the way it came across. But there are bigger things in life than a wrestling podcast, and
right.
And so our best wishes go out to his friends and family during this difficult time.
Yeah, I reached out to Eric, honestly, before we even put this ICW program together, or even thought about putting this ICW show together. And at the time, he wasn't really interested in being a part or discussing it. And that's fine. I had no problem with that. We had no cross words, so I really don't have any, experience dealing with Mr. Westlin. But it's very unfortunate. Woke up a couple days ago and saw somebody had made a post of his passing. And he had just recently contacted you, as you mentioned, Steve. It wasn't the most polite of messages, but at the end of the day, I don't pay attention to things like that. Like it gets, some people read into that a lot more than they should. And human life is a little more valuable, like you said, than a wrestling podcast. And that's really unfortunate, specifically for his family. I really feel bad about that. And also for ICW fans, because let's face it, this guy spent decades, honoring and researching and living the ICW territory since its demise, really.
Yeah. I think he was there during the time that it was an active promotion. I think he was on those television tapings, and he certainly dedicated a big part of his life to, tracking down all those strange results that pop up in different places and talking to different guys from the promotion. So. Yeah, and as we've said all along, we wouldn't have really had this podcast without his work. So
right, no, that's 100%. So guys, go on and check out all of that work. You can find it all over the internet. Like Steve had. Steve, I got to tell you again, man, your research has been incredible to me, especially in between all your assignments that you're on. that you're able to sit down and put together all of this stuff. And every bit of information I pull up, it's basically on your notes as well. So I'm like, why do I bother? But you never know when you might find just a little bit of something that Steve Crawford doesn't find. So you gotta do your own research anyway, or at least I do. I can't do a project without doing my own research. I have to, but I appreciate you. I use your show notes, your research is basically my base to kind of scroll through as we're discussing things. So, this has been fun. Doing the Jarrett and Goulas split and covering that era of the Memphis and the Nashville Memphis whole split, the war there. That was fun, and this has been equally as exciting for me because I've been wanting to cover ICW for a long time, and to be able to break it down and kind of look at it on paper and go, this is what they were doing month to month. It's been a blast, and I can't think of anybody who I would have more fun doing this one with.
It's been a blast for me. I've loved every minute of it. It's just so much of that wrestling from that era just lives in my head, and I'll be just going through life, and then you just think about something that happened from wrestling in that era, and it's just fun to revisit it. And you do a great job with all your podcasts, and I'm honored to be a part of the team.
Well, we're happy to have you. Where we go next, we'll have to wait and see in between assignments what Steve, what fancies him for the next project here with Mr. Steve Crawford on the Regional Rasslin Podcast. But until next time, guys, we'll be back soon. We've got Vandal Drummond returning from more Los Angeles, talking about the end of an era, 1982 in the LA territory. We've got Rick Fields coming back, more Georgia War going into the 1950s, and so much more here on Regional Rasslin. Steve, thanks so much for doing this with me, man.
Hey, thank you. It's been a blast.